Spider-Man movies can vary from spectacular to dreadful. It's no secret that this character can be a tricky one to get right because of the definition of Peter Parker being a bit complex and varying too. Personally, I feel both relieved and excited about Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. However, it is interesting to see how feelings towards this takes, like previous takes, have fluctuated. For example, sometimes it's trendy to look back on the Sam Raimi trilogy lovingly and appreciate the uncompromising filming style combined with the comic accuracy, and other times people just rip it to shreds, stating that it has aged badly and that it's nothing like the comics. I've noticed it's not just simply a difference of opinion from person to person, it really does come in waves. The Spider-Man of the MCU has proven to be just as prone to this, as there's been a recent influx of video essays making and presenting the point that Marvel Studios just doesn't get the character of Peter Parker, and that they're producing enjoyable films but bad Spider-Man movies. A very hipster point, but fairly justified by the points they raise, and I can see where they're coming from, even if I do respectfully disagree with what's being said here. So what are these points? Peter Parker doesn't really face much consequence for his Spider-Man antics, which defeats the character's original purpose in the comic books. Tony Stark being a far more influential character in Spider-Man's life than Uncle Ben is, and Peter having his tech handed to him by Tony Stark, rendering this character basically an Iron Man Jr. I can see where these points are coming from, and why people would think this, but honestly I feel like a lot is being missed because of this. I feel that we're all pretty aware now that a film like Spider-Man Homecoming does not stand by itself quite as strongly as, say, Spider-Man 1 or 2, however, I do think this is generally to be expected from the Marvel Cinematic Universe's episodic structure. While you do get a great time at the movies, I can't say for sure that Spider-Man Homecoming offers up 100% of what Spidey diehards may have come to expect from this character and his story, but you've really got to look to Captain America Civil War first for where this character is properly introduced. The way I see it, when it comes to Spider-Man, there are a checklist of things that we need to get from this character, otherwise it defeats the object. So, Spider-Man should have some kind of negative impact on the life and relationships of Peter Parker. Peter Parker should be something of an outcast. People need to make a mockery of him. He can't be Joe Cool, he's a mild-mannered everyman whose parents do not benefit his everyday life. Peter Parker is a genius, but this has little benefit for him. When it comes to Spider-Man, someone always has to feel pushed aside because of Peter Parker's double life. There has to be a sense of sacrifice. Peter Parker must always take responsibility when he even deserves better sometimes. He must be prepared to take a step up when he deserves a day off. So, in Spider-Man Homecoming, we see a Peter Parker that's frankly bored of being an ordinary teenager and just feels frustrated that having superpowers isn't necessarily equating to saving the world, and he just wants to prove himself. He wants to fulfill his destiny as an Avenger, but his destiny is telling him no. So understandably, this is not your typical Peter Parker story, where being Spider-Man is a hindrance to him and he just wants to live the life that he feels he deserves. Peter proactively wants to be Spider-Man and to put his life as Peter Parker on the line to do so. This is very much the reverse of, say, Spider-Man 2 and much of the Ditko era of Spider-Man, because Peter's sole ambitions lie in his life as Spider-Man. It's not treated so much as a duty, a responsibility, or an obligation. In fact, he's actively told that it's not his place to interfere in this story. As well as this, in much of the source material and other renditions of this character, Peter's creation of his own gadgets and tools as a homegrown superhero is the culmination of his unfulfilled hopes and dreams as a scientist. In Spider-Man Homecoming, Peter is granted a new set of web shooters, and the iconic Spider-Man costume is the creation of Tony Stark with a host of features and interfacing, like an Iron Man Lite in a way. So one could say that Tony Stark was the most influential catalyst into the creation of Spider-Man, and that Spider-Man rebelling against Tony Stark proves that he doesn't understand that with the great power there must also come great responsibility, hereby rendering Uncle Ben forgotten. But I feel that for these points to be made, others must have clearly been missed. To talk about Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, you must understand the episodic structure of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Before Peter even meets Tony Stark, he's already Spider-Man with his own homemade technology. Web shooters? He's already made them. Web fluid? His own invention. A suit? He already has one. Heck, he's even managed to make adapting goggles to help him refine his senses, all at the age of 15 or maybe even earlier. This kid is a genius, and sporting upgrades by Tony Stark does not change this. Peter would be a fool to turn them down. So he was already Spider-Man before he met Tony Stark. You could just say that Tony Stark made him into the Spider-Man that became an icon, the Spider-Man we know and love. He's the one that gave him the iconic look. I really don't have a problem with this, as the iconography is not something that Peter Parker would truly consider when making his costume. He made something that's kind of inspiring, and I don't mind the idea of someone else being the one that tweaks it into what we know today. It doesn't really take away from the fact that Peter is the hero, it just means that he's not so much a graphic designer. Or I guess, fashion designer. In Captain America Civil War, Iron Man questions Peter's motives, and Peter subtly explains that if he has the ability to do something when bad things happen, and he doesn't step up, then it's on his hand what happens. This is Peter admitting to what happened with Uncle Ben's death. This is what got Peter in the hoodie tracksuit combo and had him helping out. This is what made him want to be like the Avengers. A point I've heard a number of video essays is that Peter Parker should have maybe looked at a photo of Uncle Ben from time to time or something, just to remind us of his existence, but truth be told, this is actually quite a grounded perspective on grief. When people die, we don't carry framed photos around with us everywhere we go. This isn't your average Spider-Man fan film. I'm speaking from experience here. I lost my dad in 2016 to brain cancer, but I don't go carrying photos of him everywhere I go and talk to them. We carry their influence where we go. And what people don't seem to realize is that Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe acts more like Captain America in spite of Iron Man's presence in Spider-Man's life, and Captain America recognizes Peter's spirit during their tussle in Captain America Civil War with his "You got heart, kid" line. Why is that? Because he had a great upbringing with a strong moral guidance. Sure, you don't hear Uncle Ben mentioned by his name much, or constantly see pictures of him there, but you shouldn't need to. You see him in Peter. His aspirations to be a hero, to be his best self, to step up and lend a hand even when he logically shouldn't. Even when everyone is telling him to stay out of it, be it Adrian Toomes or Iron Man. Heroes and villains are telling Peter to stay down, but he just won't because of the greater influence, and that, my friends, is Uncle Ben. Okay, so we've established that Peter Parker actually is a genius and that Uncle Ben remains the core catalyst for Peter to be Spider-Man. But what about the conflict between Peter Parker and Spider-Man? Well, throughout Spider-Man Homecoming, we see that Peter Parker has two aspirations. He wants to be a hero, and he wants to impress Liz Allen. Because of his duties as Spider-Man, Peter Parker is forced into abandoning his school's scientific triathlon, so Peter ends up being seen as anything but a hero to his whole class. Does he get to date Liz Allen? Almost, but by typical Parker luck, her father just so happens to be the enemy he's trying to stop. Try explaining that one to Liz. And because of this conflict, Spider-Man also has to let Liz down at the very last minute and give up his chances to be with her, making him look like a total jackass in the process. On the flip side, Spider-Man utterly fumbles his mission to stop Vulture at the Staten Island ferry, making himself look like a bit of an idiot, much to the scorn of Iron Man. And let's not forget Delmar. During Spidey's fight with the bank robbers, he ends up destroying Delmar's sandwich store. That's his livelihood and home destroyed. Being Spider-Man does have a negative impact on Peter and the lives around him. And let's not forget that other massive expense from that time Peter helped out in the Infinity War, when he was told not to. Boom. Peter is trying to be a hero both to his classmates, to the students, to New York City, and he ends up just being a hero to nobody, and that is very, very Spider-Man. So you might say that Peter is irresponsible for constantly disobeying orders from Tony Stark, but ask yourself why. It's because he's not going to risk any of this blood and dust being on his hands again. He needs to be prepared to step up each time, every time, regardless of the risk. And that's about as Spider-Man as it gets. And yes, he's an outcast. Come on, we all saw the party scene with Flash Thompson having the whole class chant, "Penis Parker!" So there we go. These are my reasons why the Marvel Cinematic Universe absolutely, fully, 100% understands Miles Morales. Oh, come on, you think I didn't notice? The hefty best friend that knows his identity, the Lego Death Star, the science-specific school, the ambition to be an Avenger? This is almost one-to-one the same as the early Ultimate Comics all-new Spider-Man with Miles Morales making his debut. Oh, and look, his new suit in Far From Home is even taking a few cues from Miles' look. Now, to be honest, Miles Morales didn't have much of an identity of his own. He's virtually a Peter clone, just a different means to the same end. However, Miles' story in its early days ended up being one of the most quintessential Spider-Man origin renditions of the modern age, because of its less black and white take on the character, as well as staying more true to what makes a good Spider-Man story than the Ultimate Peter stories. So honestly, I have no problem with the many Miles assets being reapplied to Peter in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So there we go. These are my reasons why the Marvel Cinematic Universe absolutely, fully, 100% understands Peter Parker and the benefits of Miles Morales too. Hopefully this means we can rule out any further Spider-Men in the MCU for now. Although how cool would it be if we briefly saw Miles in Endgame stepping up after Peter's death? I mean, if it's done right, I don't mind the two existing together either. I liked it in Spider-Man PS4. Now, is the Marvel Cinematic Universe a definitive Spider-Man? I can't say. As far as I'm concerned, there are a lot of different renditions of Spider-Man that have done a wonderful job of bringing this character to life. The Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy, the Spider-Man of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Spider-Man on the PS4, which have presented a lot of things from the comics that I did dislike, but in a way that I actually really loved. I haven't seen Into the Spider-Verse yet, but in spite of my reservations about it, I've heard wonderful things and I can't wait to see it on Blu-ray. So, what do you guys think? Who's your favourite Spider-Man? Have I missed the point of these other video essays? Comment below and discuss, and also remember that by no means is any kind of attack or even a critique of others who have made video essays that I do disagree with. I'm just giving my own 2 cents on the topic. As always, if you're new here and you haven't already, don't forget to click subscribe, check out my 100th video special, link is in the description below, and have a great day, webheads. Catch you next time.
There's no easy fix for a life of hard knocks. No amount of physical power or godlike ability can change that. If you're a loser, you lose. End of story. But you know what I say to that? With great power, there must also come great...
Do you really think that preaching morality is really going to help? No time to explain.
Wait, what's going on?
Just a few little errands. I'm just trying to enjoy my breakfast, and I find someone has taken all of my Capri Sun. Fucking Lex Luthor! You sneaky bucket of b****.
I can feel it! They're close by!
Shoot him in the face!
All this is straight up unfair. Hey, I've been storing a tiny bit of cash in my boot, and they've got the whole hog special back at Jester's. I don't suppose you wanted to go out to eat. Not that it's a date or anything. I know you're taking it all, but... I think you get the picture.